Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds, a show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, licensed fishing guide, and your best friend. And it's the first show of the new year, and the month is almost over, and it is your lucky day because I am joined by the beautiful Erik Hoffner. Hi, Erik.
Hello.
Hello. You're looking very attractive this evening.
Oh, thank you much.
Yeah. So Erik, I'm so happy to have you on. So before we get into the podcast and what's going on today, we should probably let listeners know who you are if they don't know already. You're very involved at the Fish Nerds world anyway, but why don't you give yourself an introduction?
Oh, sure. I'm a journalist, so I'm not funny.
Yeah, well,
Clay. I'm very serious.
Yes, Mongabay.
Everyone knows that Clay is one of the funniest people ever, so I'm not going to try to make you laugh.
I think you're going to try.
I work for Mongabay, which is a giant environmental news site with 5 bureaus around the world, and we report in 6 languages daily. But I also produce our podcasts, which we now have in 3 languages, which is exciting.
Wow, award-winning podcast.
Oh, yes, in fact. I am joining your ranks, Clay. I know you're a long-standing award-winning podcaster.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
What was your award?
We won an Indigenous Media Association award. It was for coverage of Indigenous communities' traditional ecological knowledge, which is turning out to be really important for conservation because when you pair traditional knowledge with Western science, you actually get to better outcomes, we're finding, like, because people are just, they've been looking at the same ecosystems for, millennia, so they can inform these scientists and eggheads who've only been looking at it for a year or two. So we won an award for covering that, and that was pretty cool.
That's pretty great. That's pretty great. That means you're a better person than I am.
Oh,
yeah, because I don't cover stuff very well. We don't do journalism so well here.
Oh no! But in your real life, you're changing lives.
I somewhat. Yeah. I gave out 3 detentions. I gave out 3 detentions this week, so that's how my week has been going.
Oh, okay.
For those who don't know, I'm teaching 8th grade.
Serious or just the usual?
Had 2 kids playing hockey with science equipment when they were supposed to be doing experiments, and then another kid stole someone else's lunch. So yeah, I think pretty normal 8th grade.
Yeah, that sounds pretty.
I wasn't even mad about it. I'm like, well, I'm not mad, but yeah, I'll see you after school.
Watch me do work.
Watch me. Yeah. So anyway, so congrats on your big award. I'm glad you finally made it.
We made it.
You made it. You did it. But it is great to have you on. And so this is our first podcast after the death of John King. He's not dead. I'm just kidding.
He's just making jigs somewhere.
He really is trying to launch his business, get us going, and it turns out the Fish Nerds took up too much of his time.
Yeah,
an hour a month is a lot of work.
It is, and his effort showed. But
well, he did a lot behind the scenes, show notes, planning, that sort of thing. Something I never do. As you know, I booked you on the show a few days ago and didn't even think about the show notes until today. Whereas John plans months ahead. So he's a worker. I'm a let's throw it together and see what happens guy. So different in that sense.
Well, you've done enough of these shows that they come off pretty good at this point.
Well, practice, it's like anything. It's like anything else. But anyway, so Mongabay, and you do a lot of fishery stuff over at Mongabay. We've used your news in our news, so which is pretty great. And you when I sent you a message that I want you on the show, it was like you were a ChatGPT responder. All of a sudden, like within seconds, you had like 75 show ideas. It was remarkable. So it was great.
What can I tell you?
Go ahead.
He's caught me at the right moment, and the coffee was hitting me.
It really was, and my response back was like, "Wow, that's a lot." So But we're here now, ready to make it happen. So, but I did want to talk to you a little bit. You do a lot of fishing?
I do, just not as much these last couple of years, but I love it.
Yeah, I do any ice fishing.
I go out and I make, I have this series of ice fishing images, but I don't ice fish myself. I'm a saltwater snob. I like to fish for things that are large and very, very tasty.
Yeah, we should talk about your images because, God, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. It was a while back now. We did a story on your images. You're doing photos of ice holes, frozen.
Yeah,
ice holes.
ice fishing holes, how they freeze overnight.
Yeah, beautiful artwork there. And we went to my wife and kids and I went to Vermont to look at all the photos, and then see where did we go? We went to what was the name of the place that was at? Do you remember?
Well, yeah, it was a Brattleboro Museum.
That's where it was.
And then the Artful Ice Shanties project is going on.
Yeah, so we drove out there. That's 3 hours from us. We went out there because of you and saw all that stuff. And then we tried to go ice fishing out there in that little, in Brattleboro, there's like this ponded area right downtown on the ponded part of the river. And we fished down there for a little bit. Never saw a fish. Never saw a fish.
I was there not long ago. Folks were catching perch mostly. It's an oxbow on the Connecticut River called Treat Meadows.
Yeah, and it's supposed to have all kinds of cool fish in it, but they didn't like me. No, but so you're a saltwater snob. You're in Massachusetts. What part of Massachusetts?
Western Mass, yeah, not far from where John's daughter lives.
Right, and when he visits, he never calls.
He never called me once.
I know. Next time, the problem is now that you said that, he will call next time. So now you have to. So you live in Western Mass, nowhere near the ocean, and you're a saltwater snob.
Yeah. Well, I was raised on the tip of Long Island, and I put myself through college doing first mate on charter boat sort of jobs and some commercial fishing. But I was I grew up in a boat basically, but from the various early days, my folks had me in little tiny boats, big boats, fishing, clamming, oystering, anything.
Sounds like my childhood. I grew up on that on Coast Guard bases doing the same stuff. Fishing the ocean out of a 22-foot Grady White. Having a great time. I was spoiled.
That's a great way to grow and to see your dinner swimming and get it and put it on a plate.
Well, that's a big difference between freshwater and saltwater fishing is like when I go to the ocean to fish and I catch a fish, if it's a keeper thing, I kill it. And then if it's in freshwater, I'm like, 70-30. It's a different brain space. So, but you want to talk a little bit about striped bass. You had striped bass on the brain.
Striped bass, yeah. I'm not sure how much listeners know about what's going on lately with striped bass.
Well, we did a story a few months ago, and we were rethinking circle hooks. And it turns out that the modern circle hooks have no more mortality rate than regular fishing hooks. So it was exactly the same. There was no difference.
When I've used circle hooks with eels for stripers, it's been ridiculously accurate. So I think it's species specific. I've always had just jaw hooks every time.
With the circle hooks.
Yep.
Yeah, but they found no
really
difference.
High hookup rate.
With stripers, they found no difference.
With stripers, yeah.
Yep. And I have 0 hookup rate with circle hooks and stripers. I've
You can't wait. You're too keyed up.
I can't take it. So I was out fishing this summer with Dave Kellum, one of the original founders of Fish Nerds, and we're striper fishing, and we're jigging up a mackerel, putting on a hook, on a circle hook, and putting it in the water. And the stripers come by, and they're like a foot away from you, and you see them swipe and swallow this mackerel, and he's catching them, and I'm just yanking hooks out of fish's mouths.
Yeah, because he's waiting.
I don't know,
like an adult.
I don't know what that means.
Well, you have to wait. You have to count. Maybe you should learn to ask Dave what he counts to.
Okay.
And see if you can count that high, and then
that I do it.
That.
Yeah, that's my problem. I'm not a listener. See,
because we were raised using J hooks, and as soon as you get the fish hook, the fish takes the bait. You just grab, reel back.
Yes, that's how I fish. And that's what ice fishing is too. The same thing. Anything touches you and you yank it like it's a monster and it's a 3-inch perch. It doesn't matter. But what about striped bass you want to talk about? You were talking about.
Well,
You
I
got a
mean,
whole
they're
thing.
part of the reason I hardly fished at all last year because it's one of my favorite species to target, and I have a fishing kayak, and so I've really dialed in a system
Mm-hmm.
for targeting them and being real selective about the kinds and sizes I catch. But it's just gotten really hard because the regulations are such that you have a hard time catching a keeper. And
Does Massachusetts have a slot or is it like a size?
yeah, it has a slot limit.
Mm.
You can only keep a fish between 28 and 31 inches.
Really
One
small
day.
slot.
Yeah, 3 inches in
Wow.
between those little spaces.
God.
And that's because in last year they looked back in the records and said, okay, well, that was our fifth straight poor spawn during the spring. And so we're going to have to keep this ridiculously small. And the population is already deemed to be overfished.
Right. Well, 'cause
So
everyone goes after them.
yeah, because they're delicious and they're sporty and pretty, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so you look at that and you realize you have to release everything under 28 inches and anything over that. And the science says 5 to 10% of any fish you release are going to die eventually from either the fight or the handling or an injury, who knows? But that's what happens. That's what the science tells us.
And that's all species?
Pretty much, but specific to stripers, I read today that 9% is what one captain says he trusts and what he believes is true. So that you add up that number and you realize guys are going out and gals trying to catch that one fish,
Mm-hmm.
and it might take 20 or 30 fish to the boat or to the beach to get that one keeper. And so math suggests you kill 2 or 3 more eventually as well, in addition. So, I mean, given the low stock assessment, I guess I just didn't want to participate in that.
Yeah. You know what shocks me is that there isn't a small fish on like for my money and knowing what I know about fishes and how they migrate and move around, and when they're smaller, there's more of them. So I'm surprised there isn't like you can keep 2 stripers that are 12 inches or less, and like forget the big ones entirely, because the numbers of those schoolies are going to way outnumber all those big fish because they, by the time they get big, the predation's happened on them, and so there's not that many big fish out there. And so I think it would be more effective to like forget keeping big fish entirely, and you'd have less mercury in your fish if you eat them small. So it's a win for everyone.
Right.
Plus, babies taste better. Everyone knows that.
Babies, oh yeah. But yeah, no, fisheries managers look at that and they're like, well, we want to keep more of those little fish in the water so they can get big.
Fair.
So, people get paid a lot of money to do that.
They do.
Kind of
Maybe they never even thought of that. Maybe I'm the
figure
first
these
one.
things out.
Yeah.
It's above our pay grades.
Yeah. Well, I just followed most of the rules. I've never caught a keeper striper. My biggest one in New Hampshire, it was 2 years ago, fishing in Exeter, right downtown Exeter, in about 7 inches of water, using a live herring, and it was 27 3/4. And 28 was keeper size.
Man, oh man.
So close. So close. Yeah, I killed it anyway.
Of course you did.
I did not. Well, I have no idea.
With your good looks.
I have no idea.
And your dad jokes.
Yeah. That might have been a circle hook, actually, now I think about it. That might have been.
Yeah.
Because I was fishing with Dave Callum, and he makes me follow the rules. So.
Good man.
Yeah. He might have handed me a rod with a fish already on it. I don't know.
I'm a catch and quit kind of fisher. I'm not a catch and release kind of fisher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do endless rounds of catch and release and show everyone how good a fisher I am.
So when you go out hunting for
something and bring it home and cook it, and
well, that's what I do if I'm hunting a specific fish. So if I'm going out getting white perch through the ice and I want to have dinner and I get 4 white perch, which is plenty for our family for dinner, I don't want to fish anymore. I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Perfect size, usually great eating. Yeah. So last year I just targeted black sea bass, which is a real yummy, sporty fish you can jig for. So it's an active fishing. It's not like bait.
And it's fast paced.
Oh, it's fast paced,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, as the bonus is, is catching small bluefish or bonito, which we got that day as
Oh,
well.
that'd been
Also
fun.
delicious.
Yep, little
Yeah,
cunners here and there, sea robins.
yeah. You never know.
We were
Yeah.
fishing. Where were you fishing for?
Kind of near the mouth of Rhode Island is where, or the mouth of the big river near Newport, Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dave and I were jigging them up in the Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in the
Mhm.
Piscataqua River. We were jigging black sea bass, and I prefer that to striper fishing because the pace is better.
The pace is great. They're
Hmm.
delicious. You can cook them whole on the grill.
I never got a
Man.
keeper still though. I just
Oh man.
I
Yeah.
can't
No,
catch a break. I can't catch a break.
so the other thing that got me about the striper fishing is that, I like to fish the southwest edge of Block Island too, that really fancy place where, 50-pound plus bass have been caught. I've caught and released one that size there.
Hmm.
But this past year, people out there were fishing hard to catch that one keeper bass and they were getting sharked.
Oh,
All these areas, sand tiger sharks and the other species of quote unquote brown sharks, as they call them, the three different species, they all started keying in on the free buffet at the end of the line, kind of like you see in the Gulf of Mexico. You've probably seen it on Instagram
hmm.
where snappers and groupers are bitten in half.
Right, you're just reeling in the head of the fish afterwards.
Yep. Yep. So there was on Instagram, you could also see reels of people reeling in half stripers or releasing a striper and watching it get just chowed right there at the boat,
Oh,
a feeding frenzy. So there's bits and pieces of stripers floating away. So
by the way, they don't catch and release well when they're bitten in half. That's fun fact.
I tend to agree.
Yeah, scientists would also agree.
Yes.
That's where we and scientists kind of agree.
Thank you, science.
Thank you, science.
Yeah, and it's like, so that whole thing was really unappealing too. That just added to the mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So then what we learned 2/3 of the way through this year was that this last spring, the 2024 spring spawn in the Chesapeake was also pretty awful. And that's 6 seasons in a row of technically failed spawns.
Ouch.
And that's in the Chesapeake, but that's where 80% of the East Coast stripers come from, is the rivers that feed into the Chesapeake Bay. And it's the exact same pattern that gave us the striped bass moratorium of the 1980s, as I understand it.
Do you think that's coming back?
Yeah, I think that it's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think all these things go in cycles.
Mm-hmm.
But what's a trick right now is there's two new factors that weren't around in the 80s. And this is being studied. But one thing is definitely the warmer, drier winters we've been having. That triggers earlier spawning with the stripers. So they go up in the rivers too soon. So when they're up there, they have these, all of a sudden you have little baby stripers and they're ready to eat, but there's not enough microscopic zooplankton in the Chesapeake yet.
Too early.
They need little baby larvae hanging around of the little crabs and the little, oysters and all those things to eat. So there's this asynchrony happening around climate change.
You don't think of these things.
Yeah, I know. And that kind of thing is happening with, bird species who fly up along the East Coast as well. They stop in the islands and things like this to eat certain kinds of worms. And lately the worms haven't been coming out at the right time. So the birds are hungry and they're not weak. They're weak and they're not able to get all the way up to the Arctic. So the other thing is that the non-native blue catfish are really making a dent in stripers in the Chesapeake, apparently.
I wouldn't even think about catfish impacting striped bass, but I guess they're spawning in fresh water, right?
Yeah, typically fresh water.
Yeah.
But, this is a brackish ecosystem. And they're doing quite well, thank you. And it turns out that these blue cats like to eat other fish,
of course,
which includes stripers, little baby stripers, but also the other baby fish that stripers would eat.
So would you turn anglers on to eating crabs, blue cats?
Yeah. Oh man. there's a big thing going on now. People are really getting into it, and there's no limits. So people are going out like as an activist sort of point of view with jug lines, like long lines of baited hooks, and just pulling up tubs and tubs full of blue cats and selling them.
Well, I can tell you the best bait for blue cats. Chunk striper.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Post that to social media, please.
Yeah, I'll put it up there. I'll put up a little meme.
Right up.
Yeah.
Very good.
All bets are off now, so
All bets. Yeah.
now that there's
So
no
there's so
no
many
rules.
blue cats being caught that I've even been able to buy it in the local fish market here in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Really?
Yeah.
I bet it's delicious.
And it's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm down.
That's catfish.
Well, catfish are always good, so I'm in.
Yeah.
All right. What do you say? You want to move on to some news?
I do.
All right, I'm gonna hit the button. It's the orange one.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
All right, now everyone loves fish in the news, Eric, and you are a big news guy, so we're gonna go back and forth and just swap some news stories here today. And the first one is really recent, and this is I'm gonna try my best not to be political, but this is having to do with the wildfires out in Los Angeles. And what fish do you think is at fault for the wildfires?
Oh, the hot one.
The
Really hot fish.
the really attractive fish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The one that's smoking hot.
Yeah, well, is the Delta smelt is being blamed by our current president for them not being able to put the fires out. Delta smelt. Yeah. Delta smelt, because he who smelt it dealt it. You got it. And the Delta smelt. See, I did all the puns in one word there. So Donald Trump has declared that the Delta smelt as a worthless fish, blaming efforts to protect the species for the devastating Los Angeles wildfires. So that's the fault right there. But California's Delta smelt has a minimal connection to the city's water supply. Experts argue U.S. President's willingness to condemn the species reflects the chaotic and short-sighted nature of his environmental policy. So they're scapegoating this little fish because they're protecting it, because the area is protecting it, but it's endangered. So the question is, what do you do? If you've got a disaster happening and you've got fish or some endangered species in the way of it, at what point do you, let's say, forget that endangered species, we need to save a house or 1,000 houses?
Yeah, well, that's a red herring.
It is a red herring because the fish didn't do anything.
Because, the water in Northern California wouldn't have helped LA.
Nope.
There was plenty of water in the reservoirs near LA to do it. They just couldn't get the water from the reservoirs into the hoses onto the houses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, they had fire tornadoes, like fire hurricanes. Can you imagine? Like, I can't imagine how to fight this thing. Like what they could have done, and just to blame a little fish. That made any sense to me, but it made news. So there it is. We all now know about the Delta smelt. So
and what some people pointed out was that the Trump team would have a harder time pointing a finger if it was salmon, but because it was this tiny little, almost transparent little fish, they were like, "Yeah."
Why would salmon be harder?
Oh, because it's just a charismatic fish that everybody loves, and
Mm-hmm. They call it like charismatic megafauna, something like that. Is that the phrase?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, that's actually in the article here. Tufts University sociologist Caleb Scoville says you can't blame the salmon because salmon aren't as easy to target because of the people love salmon. So yeah, always blame the little fish. This poor little smelt. Yeah, so that's my first story. I just wanted to put up because I just I just kind of like the idea of that red herring of a fish impacting the state in that way. I don't love the fires, but I'm not on team fire either, in case people were wondering. I'm against fires. I'm going to come out publicly right now against your house burning down.
I'm glad to hear you reiterate that.
Right.
I feel like you were already on the record, but now it's for sure.
Sometimes, in modern times, 2025 now, sometimes we need to come out very clearly against something. And I will make a stand right here and now. I am against anyone's house being burned down.
Very
So,
good.
yeah.
And I am very against anyone running with scissors.
Yes. That's a very, very, I'm so proud of you.
Oh,
All right. So, Eric, give me a story. What do you got?
all right. Well, just a couple things from Mongabay, of course.
Right. It's
This is
mongabay.com.
Mongabay.com.
Mm-hmm.
This is very germane to what we've been talking about. There's a new move to reel in salmon farms, these offshore net pen situations where salmon are grown, and they keep them in their little pens, and they hurl all the pet food basically into the water, and they eat them, and they cause a lot of disease problems, and there's a lot of fecal material that rains down on the seafloor near these things, and sea lice come out of them. So in fact, Washington State recently, it was the last of the West Coast states to say no more offshore salmon farms. They got to be
Good.
onshore. Yeah,
Yeah. Have you seen these things up close?
I have.
Yeah, me too. So I went out to Washington State a few years ago, and I motored up to one of these salmon farms out in the Straits of Juan de Fuca, and salmon are jumping all over the place, and it's crazy. They're huge,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, and you can't get too close because the guys in the other boats come out and they start yelling.
yeah. Well, my dad was in the Coast Guard, so we were in an okay position there. So
Just flashing his badge around.
that's
Come
right.
on.
I'm a chief warrant officer. But
Mhm.
the problem out there at the time, this is like when I say a few years ago, I'm probably thinking now 15 or 20 years ago. But the problem then was the salmon were escaping,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yep.
causing problems.
Yeah, and they swim right up the same rivers that the wild Pacific salmon are going up, and in some cases they're bigger and stronger than the wild Pacific salmon because they've
Mm-hmm.
been just hanging around in this net pen, swimming in a circle, getting free food, not fighting for their lives. So yeah, it's a real genetic problem. And also, they park these net pens right at the mouths of rivers usually,
Mm-hmm.
where it's easy because there's a port there on either side, sometimes on both sides, so you can get your little boats and to run out and get the salmon out of your nets and all that, and shoot the seals that are trying to get in or whatever when that happens. So because they're stationed right at the mouths of these rivers that the wild salmon are swimming up, the wild salmon are swimming right through this basically a debris cloud of
Mm-hmm.
you know sea lice and also pathogens
Right, all
that
kinds of
yeah
parasites.
feel like basically like a flu that a lot of these farm salmon have, and it just they find that these wild salmon contract those things. First you got a bloodsucker, and then you have a disease.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do as well climbing those rivers.
Right,
Anyway,
because
so
you have a salmon that's not eating already. Body's already fallen apart, and now all of a sudden it's being attacked by parasites and disease, and then it has to fight upstream. Like that's
yeah,
a big ask.
it's a big ask.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Washington State was the final last straw, and they're out of there.
Good.
So point of this new article in Mongabay is that salmon farms are now under fire on the East Coast as well, because in Maine there are, and this is where I've seen most of the nets. They're between about 100 miles of the Canadian border. There's a bunch of sites where they have salmon farms still being operated by Cook Aquaculture, but an environmental advocacy group has filed a lawsuit against them um, under the Clean Water Act, alleging pattern of illegal discharges from the farms that create toxic marine conditions. So, yeah, so this is going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. And, I know some of the communities a little bit that these farms are important to, and it is a big employer, but there's also people who dig clams for a living,
Mm-hmm.
who fish in other ways. So, it's more the seafood industry and the jobs it supports are more than just salmon
It's
up there.
tough.
So
And we're so in love with salmon for some reason. Like it's the best fish on the planet, and there's so many better tasting fish.
they really are.
I'm
And
so
I would eat
unattracted
a
to eating
wild
salmon.
salmon any day over a farmed one. I think the farmed ones are so fatty.
What are you talking about? Atlantic salmon?
Atlantic salmon,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that stuff
And
in the
I just
store.
avoid Atlantic salmon entirely. And if I go out west, like I'm going to Seattle in 3 weeks, I will probably eat some Chinook salmon.
Mm.
We go down to the it's a supermarket, and then the locals sell them out of the back of their pickup trucks.
Mhm.
That's where you buy your
Nice.
salmon. Yeah,
Yeah, you don't even have to
from-
go to Pike Street Market anymore.
No, the indigenous
They're all over.
indigenous people are selling them. I don't even know what the right words are.
Yeah, super cool.
My folks call them Indians. So
Well,
yeah,
a lot of native people, use Indian themselves. It's, the
Yeah.
word that they've always used, because of history. But
right.
yeah,
So anyway, so that's my plan is to go eat some, but I'm gonna eat other. I'm to be honest, when I go out west looking for seafood, I'm more into like the shellfish. I'm gonna eat a Dungeness crab.
oh,
Yeah,
well, how about sea urchin?
I don't like them.
Come on,
I don't. Do you like them?
have a little uni.
It's gross. I can. I don't like them. I try it so many times, and every time I'm like, yeah, no. Mm-mm. But
Well, while you're out there, you can consider hiring a guide to take you out poke poling.
tell people what poke polling is. We did this story for you a few months ago. What is it?
It's this way to fish in the tide pools when the tide is low. On the West Coast, the tide pool situation is really diverse and interesting, and there's boulders everywhere. So these fish just hang out in the water underneath boulders and stuff, and the waves are not even crashing in there. So you can walk around right out there, and you attach a short leader, like about a foot or two of heavy fluorocarbon leader, and a hook on the end of like a broom handle
Mm-hmm.
or a piece of bamboo, a cane, anything, and you bait the hook, and you just stick the thing right underneath any rock you see, and just wiggle.
Oh, I'm in. And do you know
And
people?
you catch insane, incredible fish out of there.
Yeah. What kind of fish are you catching?
All kinds of different kinds of rockfish.
Oh, nice.
I have caught the monkey face prickleback
It's the best fish name I think there is.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where did you do it?
This is in Northern California.
Northern California. So where would one find a guide for this? A poke pole guide?
I'm sure I can find one for you.
All right, find me one.
All right.
I'm so in on that. Someone who does it on the Olympic Peninsula, where I'll be.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's
lot of options up there for ocean. So,
Hmm.
yep. We usually go out to CQ, and we're not going to do it this time because it's going to be in February. But usually go out to CQ, and we would trawl for king salmon out there.
You mean squim?
My parents live in Squim.
Oh, okay.
That's where I'll be staying in Squim.
All right. I thought you were trying to say squim, but
No, I'll be staying in Squim, but CQ. I think it's SEQU. It's the very northwestern tip of the country, I think.
Very cool.
Yeah, but we're not gonna do much fishing. It's February, so who knows what I'll get into? But I'll find something to do. I'll find something fishy to play with. All right, give us one more. You got a Galapagos story.
Oh yeah, and this is not actually newsy so much, but it is something journalism related that came off my own desk.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be fun to share. I was in the Galapagos last month for work.
Oh, not to brag or nothing, but I saw an old turtle.
I don't get many perks for work, but
That's a pretty good perk. That's a pretty damn good perk.
yeah. So spent 4 days on a dive ship going around island to island, and there's just this giant marine protected area around all the islands, and all the land itself is part of the national park pretty much. There's only like 10% of the land is not a national park. So all the wildlife has got the rule of the roost, and they know it. Like, they are not afraid of you. They look at you and they're like, oh yeah, it's a human. So there's sea lions draped all over everything, everywhere in the towns, sleeping under your car. We went to this one place where we were looking at a freshwater pond on the interior of an island, and we were looking at flamingos, and they were out there eating, doing their sifting thing in the water. And this young one came walking up to us and looked at us and walked all around, and then just walked right through the middle of our group. We had to part ways for this flamingo to walk straight through our group because it wanted to go down the trail.
Yeah. And they're protected, so you can't be in their way.
Nope. Yeah, you have to keep 6 feet distance or something like that. Or 2 meters. Yeah. So we were like, oh, okay, you want to do that? Go ahead.
Just step aside here so you can flamingo past me. Yeah. That's so cool. They're so in charge.
They know they're in charge.
Those are the happiest animals on the planet.
They're really cool.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And diving, like the sea lions get within inches of you, and they're big.
I'd be scared to death.
I got pictures of these things, like they were so close I couldn't even focus the camera.
No kidding.
Man. Yeah, but I saw so many incredible fish because that marine reserve keeps everything out. They have some problems with enforcement here and there, but it's by and large, you're not allowed to fish in there. You can hire a guide, but it's all catch and release. A few species that locals can target, and they are allowed to sell those locally to restaurants and all that.
Oh, that's really cool.
And it's pretty healthy, but there are problems as well. And part of the thing is that the ecotourism boom is just huge. Like 300,000 people crowd in there every year, and that's restricting it. Like the government only allows a certain number of people to come to any island or any dive spot on any day.
Well, that must be so hard because with 300,000 people want to go or can go. There must be millions and millions who want to go. So the government has the opportunity to earn as much money as they want, but out of conservation efforts, have to cap it. That's a challenge for a government to do because how do you could fund your whole country.
Oh, I know.
On tourism.
It is a challenge, and more and more foreign interests want to get involved and bring their own dive ships and have their own operations, and they're struggling to keep them out. Only like a few of the dive boats are locally owned and run, and I was happy to be on one of them. And it was pretty interesting to hear their, point of view. So that was the point of the piece that I wrote. I interviewed our guide because if you go there, you can't just walk around unless you're in the tourist towns or whatever. You have to hire a guide to go someplace if you want to see an island or something.
Well, probably because they got to help you keep safe and protect all the animals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And you're only allowed to be in any one spot for 3 hours. And then you got to be out of there, and because the next group is coming.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all scheduled.
I love it. And we'll put a link.
So many big, beautiful fish underwater, just diving. There's like huge parrotfish.
That's what I'm looking at on your article at mongabay.com. I'm seeing a picture of that parrotfish on there. It's beautiful. But not, it's funny. You went there and look at your article. I want more pictures.
You got to pay.
I got to pay. All right. Well, if people are interested, they can go to our fishnerds.com. And in this podcast episode, there are links and you can read and listen to this article. You have a little audio piece for it too, right? The biodiversity hotspot of Raja Ampat.
Yeah, that's a similar thing we did last year.
Yeah.
To get back to your point, it's a good question. All the pictures that I made, that anybody makes when we work for Mongabay, they're all free. Anybody can use them. It's Creative Commons because we're a nonprofit news outlet. Anybody can republish our articles on their own website.
With citations?
Yeah. Exactly.
So what I'm going to do,
Credit us and you link back to us and say, Clay Groves wrote this article.
yeah.
You can use it. You can even sell ads around it. We don't care.
All right. So what
We're
I'm
just
going to
trying
do,
to get information about conservation and how it works, and how it doesn't work out. Yeah.
perfect. So what I'm going to do on this episode of the Fish Nerds podcast, I just took from your website the parrotfish photo, and that will be the cover art of this week's podcast. So look at you. You've done it. You're a cover model.
Blue chin parrotfish.
Go team. All right, cool. Really cool. I didn't realize you get to go to places like Galapagos Island, Erik. I am so like in the wrong business. Yep, I wish I could write.
You get to do cool stuff too.
I don't get to go to Galapagos Islands. I get to read about them. But that's amazing. All right, we're going to wrap the news up there, and then we have to talk about sex.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
All right, Erik, do you like sex?
I've been known to.
Yeah, I think most organisms enjoy it. And I think humans, as far as I can tell, are the only animals that reproduce with the have sex with the intent of reproduction. I think everything else just does it because it's fun.
It's just fun. Yeah.
It's just fun. I don't think animals can reason, if I do this, I'll have babies. Humans can reason that. The rest just do it because we're awesome. Backwards. We're backwards. It's like some animals will die to have sex. They'll let you eat their face off their heads and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit about fish sex, and we have a theme song here from the mysterious Baitcaster Cylinder. It's been a minute since I played this.
Everyone, it seems, wants to get more fish in the world. It's up to you and me, girl. Come on. There's only one way we're gonna get more fish in this world. It's up to you and me, girl. Let's spawn.
Might be the perfect song.
It's the best.
It is. On Valentine's Day every year I play that for my wife, and every year I have to wait for next Valentine's Day before I can play it again. That's
Well, it's coming up.
It's coming right up, and I want to talk about it. I found an article on the Royal Society of Open Science, and this is reproduced by republished by Newsweek magazine, and they found a wild finding that they found a fish species that can mate 27 times a day without any medical support. They just can do it 27 times a day. This is an amazing little fish. And mating more, by the way, would make it really challenging for that fish. It gets really tired after 27 times. But the new study reveals that it's called the Medaka males, Medaka, Medaka, release less and less sperm each time they mate, eventually hitting a day limit. The most they can do is 27. So what they did was they took these fish and they actually measured the sperm count of these fish and counted the sperm each time they did, averaging 19 times a day, and some achieving up to 27 times a day. And they release their sperm in the water, and then they can fertilize the eggs for a female. I'm sorry, if there's young listeners, when two fish love each other very, very much, I'm just kidding.
The fish stork comes along.
The fish stork comes along and drops a fish down your chimney. But it's crazy the amount of times they do it. They don't say why they do it, but the effort. But the males put a lot of effort into the first time of the day. So the very first time that the fish spawn, they put a ton of effort in. They're being romantic. They bought flowers, fancy dinners, all that stuff. Each consecutive time they mate with these fishes, and they're not mating with any particular fish, they are dropping their sperm in the water, the effort is less. So it just kind of, it degrades over time. Also, along with that, the amount of actual sperm that goes in the water becomes less as well. So it just, I don't know what else this all means. I just thought the headline was great. So That's pretty much the whole story. But they did correlate this with other animals. Turns out all animals that reproduce with sperm, the more you do it in a day, the less sperm you have in that day. So it's not complicated math.
Mm-hmm.
And the less interested you are in doing it more that day.
Mm-hmm.
But 27 is quite a bit.
That's a lot.
It's quite a bit. I don't think I've ever even considered that number.
Yep.
Yep.
I took a look at this before when I looked at the show notes,
Yep.
and the line that jumped out to me was the following. These findings imply that sperm is a limited resource for both sexes, potentially leading to sexual conflicts.
Yes. And there's nothing more fun than a sperm conflict.
I mean, the mind goes wild.
What else can you talk about? What else can you talk about? Except for sex with clownfish, which is a very important detail. You know, for years, we've been telling here on the Fish Nerds podcast the true story of Finding Nemo, which, as you know, Nemo's mom dies. Nemo and his dad are left alone in the anemone. Nemo's dad becomes a female. Nemo spawns with his mom or dad. That's the true story of clownfish. That's how it really works, right? And so for years and years and years, scientists just thought that this is an article, by the way, at scubatravel.co. People thought for years and years and years that this happened quickly. The clownfish changed sex, and that was it. We had a male and female. It turns out it ain't true. It's not fast. In fact, it turns out that a clownfish can take on female traits for well over a year before taking on actual female gonads, essentially becoming a trans fish or a cross-dresser fish, acting as a female, interacting as a female, mating as a female, doing all the female things. Even the brain is acting like a female clownfish brain, but not the gonads. The gonads catch up sometime a year later.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Incredible.
It's incredible.
It's almost behavioral in a way.
It's what?
It's almost like a behavioral.
It is almost like that. Yeah, I mean, they don't know why this all happens. But, yeah, it's why...
Obviously has some advantage, some adaptative advantage for fish.
It seems to me, well, you know, we all know that having babies is not an advantage. But for fish, it is. I mean, that's the whole thing. Is the more babies you have, the more your species carries on. But it was funny. They counted neurons in the brain, took blood samples, look at sex hormones, all this stuff, and they just figured all this stuff out. It's a wild amount of research they do for this. But I was surprised too. Is what do you think is more aggressive, the female clownfish or the male?
I mean, just based on personal experience, the female.
The female is, and so when the two male clownfish are in an anemone together, the most aggressive one is the one that goes to the female side, right? Which is really cool because you always thinking I mean, growing up in the culture we live in, you automatically think the more aggressive one's gonna be the male. And so it's fun to see something that kind of goes against the grain of common culture and common thought, and it happens to be Finding Nemo.
Boy, you know what? And the more we look, the more we find stuff like this.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Nature is kind of queer.
It's super queer, and it's funny. The thing I love about that is, for years, my whole life, you hear like people who are against LGBTQ plus people saying it's an abomination to nature. And you're like, well, is nature an abomination to nature? Because here it is. Right in front of you.
Right in front of you.
Here's your abomination. Yeah. By the way, humans are part of nature, so we are not an abomination.
Penguins, I mean, it's all over.
Yeah.
You know, and here's the thing, Clay, why you choosing that parrotfish as the cover art for this episode is perfect, is that those parrotfish, I believe, if I'm getting this right, all those parrotfish are born female.
Yes.
And then they turn male eventually, but only like once the dominant male dies, and then the biggest female in the area becomes male.
Yep. I did a story on that a few years ago. It's totally true. That's amazing. It's so cool. And by the way, new executive order just passed last week that announced that all Americans are now females. So the anti-transgender, the one that they said there's only boys and girls, it said everyone is the gender of their conception. And at that point, we are all female. So, okay. Girl,
That's
how you
cool.
doing?
I mean, I've always been curious what it's like to be a woman.
Now you know.
Now I know.
Girl, look at you. So cool. So that is cool, and that is clownfish, and that is our fish sex. Do I play the whole song, or do I fade out? That's the question. I want to fade out.
It's up to you and me, girl.
Come on. This is very sexy.
There's only one way we're gonna get more fish in this world.
I need this for my ringtone.
I'll send it to you.
And me, girl. Let's spawn.
Romance there from the mysterious baitcaster cylinder. When he sent that to me, he said, "Clay, please never tell my name on air. Never say it out loud." But the song is perfect. It's so good. Erik, we've done it. We've made a podcast together. We had a good time. Is there any final things you need to cover, things you need to say? Any Mongabay rules you got to drop on us?
So happy to help you make a new episode of this terrific show.
Well, thank you so much. And it's funny, once in a while, I hear you on like another podcast, like you call Libsyn. They do a podcast called The Feed. It's about podcasts about podcasting, which I listen to. That's how nerdy you and I both are. We listen to podcasts about podcasting. But I hear you on there once in a while with a Colin or something like that. And I'm always like, I know that guy. So it's always cool to cross paths with you, Erik. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Pleasure. That's it. I'm done. Wet my hands of it. All right. Well, Erik, I'm going to do the thanks here. Thank you, Erik Hoffner, Erik with a K, from Mongabay. We got to thank Wally Pleasant doing our opening theme music for the show. Diana's Bath Salts for our news theme, and the mysterious baitcaster cylinder for the sexy, sexy music. So here, Erik, it's a time where you get to say the closing. So you get to say until next time.
Until next time, follow the code of the fish nerds. Spawn early and often. Never trust a free lunch with strings attached. And swim against the current every chance you get.
You did it, Erik. You made a podcast. Congratulations. Award-winning podcast.
Or deep in the ocean,
You did it.
cast
Hang on a second.
nets. The fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Just for the halibut.
Fried in a basket or broiled in a pan. Eat it raw like you're in Siam. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Erik Hoffner, you did it.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.